parents about it, and my mother was like, 야, 너 그런 쓸데없는 짓 하지 말고 진짜 job 좀 얻어라. So for those of you who don't speak Korean, she's like, you know what, can you please just find a real job so I'm not going to have to pay your rent? And so I sort of agonized with this decision because the other thing that I was thinking about doing was going to graduate school. And of course, that's what every Korean family wants you to do, is become a doctor or a lawyer or an investment banker or go to graduate school. So my mother was really pushing for that. And finally, I came home one day and I told my parents that I decided that I was going to join Teach for America and that I was going to go to Baltimore City and teach. And my mother was like, 잔소리, 잔소리, 잔소리. My father at one point said, 여보, 고만, which means, in English, means like, honey, put a lid on it. So I joined Teach for America. They sent me to Baltimore, and they placed me in a school which was one of the lowest performing schools in the city. 100% African American, 100% free and reduced lunch, so it was all poor and minority kids. I was by far the only teacher there who was Korean American. In fact, the only Korean people that these kids ever had exposure to was the people who owned the corner store. And so I was an anomaly, and my first year I was just awful. I was a really, really bad teacher. And about November I went home for Thanksgiving, and I had developed this stress condition where when I scratched myself, these welts would appear, and my mother saw this one day and she was like, oh my gosh. Like, what are you doing? You can't go back there. And so I was sort of struggling because I was trying to figure out, should I go back? Should I quit? What should I do? And my father, on the Sunday before I was supposed to head back home, packed my bags for me and said, suck it up and head back. So I did. And at that point, my mother sort of changed her tune too, and I would call home all the time, and I would tell them these stories about what I was experiencing. I taught in this school that was so under-resourced that we literally did not have basic supplies, books, paper. And when I told my mother this, she immediately ran out to Costco and bought 36 pairs of scissors and markers and crayons and sent them all to Baltimore, so much so that my kids would always say to each other when they were using the scissors, don't mess up Ms. Rhee's mother's scissors. And I had a very interesting experience because the summer between my first and second year, I decided that I was not going to let 8-year-olds ruin my life. And I spent the entire summer planning and cutting out things and pasting and working so that I could have a better year after that. My second and third year in Baltimore, I worked with another colleague and we team taught. We brought 75 kids into one classroom together, and we looped with them, which means that we took them through their second and third grade year together. And we took a group of kids who were on average scoring at the 13th percentile on nationally recognized standardized tests, so at the bottom. And at the end of their second year with us, 90% of them were scoring at the 90th percentile or above. And what it taught me was that, a lot of people like to say, and people still do today, say, poor kids in urban communities can't overcome the environmental factors. If their parents don't care, if they didn't eat breakfast before they got to school, all these reasons prohibit kids from being able to achieve. And what my experience showed me was that that was absolutely untrue. The kids in my community, over this 2-year period, their home lives didn't change, their parents didn't change, their diets didn't change, their neighborhoods didn't change. What changed was the adult who was in front of them every single day, holding them to a different standard. And so people used to ask me all the time, well, what did you do? What was the magic? I was not a great teacher, quite honestly. What we did was very simple. We had extraordinarily high expectations of the kids, and every day when they walked into school, we told them that they were going to college and that they could achieve anything. We invested their parents and the community in what we were doing because people, literally thought I was nuts. I used to give my kids, second graders, 2 hours of homework a night. And now that I'm the mother of a second grader and I can barely get through 20 minutes with my kid, I think I was a little crazy back then. And the parents were like, what are you doing? These are 8-year-olds. They can't do 2 hours of homework a night. And I said, yes, they can, because their options, where I taught, these kids were not going after school to soccer practice or piano lessons. They were going to sit out on the front stoop or watch TV or play Nintendo. They were not going to be engaged in meaningful activities. So at very least, you should be doing homework. And so we engaged the community in that. The parents got it. And the bottom line is that we just worked harder. I brought them in before school. I kept them after school. We worked on weekends, and that's what was necessary to bring these kids from where they were, which was so far below grade level, to where they needed to be. And when you did all those things, the kids could achieve. So this sort of drove my professional career and everything that I did after that. But my parents still had no idea what I was doing or why I was doing it. So after I left the classroom, I went to Harvard, which is every Korean parent's dream. And so finally my mother said, okay, thank you. Now, she did that crazy thing for 3 years, but now she's at Harvard. When I graduated from Harvard, I founded an organization called the New Teacher Project, which is a nonprofit organization nationally that works to recruit great teachers into urban districts. And so for the whole 10 years that I ran the New Teacher Project, my parents had no clue what I was doing and couldn't explain it. I remember one day I heard a conversation that my father was having where one of his friends asked him, well, what does your daughter do? And he thought about it for a while. He's like, well, I think she's like a teacher or something. So it really wasn't until I actually got this job that my parents can finally explain to people what it is that I do. And when we came to make the announcement, Mayor Fenty was going to make the announcement about my nomination, and that was going to happen on a Tuesday, and we got off the plane here at Dulles on a Sunday. My parents were with me, my kids were with me. We were walking off the plane, and there was a newsstand to our right, and the Washington Post had just run a huge series about the schools. And so on the front page was the huge headline, "Can D.C. schools be fixed?" And my mother looked at that and was like, oh, yeah. Like, has seen me?